Welcome to Beside Ourselves, a podcast on AI adoption for business by the Beside Partners.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beside Ourselves, the podcast about AI adoption for small to medium enterprises or SMEs. And joining me, as always, is Theo. Hi, Theo.
Hello, everybody. Hello, how's it going? Hey, Giles.
Hi. Yeah, another warm day here in the UK. I don't know what it's like over in mainland Europe, but we seem to be having one hell of a summer.
Absolutely. And without aircon. Let's see. I don't know if we should be talking about AI so much as we should be talking about aircons.
Yeah,
I think that's where the future is. Just,
yeah.
If we can get Claude to kind of like just blow cold air at me all day, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for those that might be listening to this out of timeline, this is July 2026. People might be listening to this in like December going, what are these guys talking about? But yes, this is recorded in July. So hence the reason why we're talking about that. So, right. So just the two of us again today. So I think we're talking where we have a sort of bouncing around ideas. I think the stuff that sort of jumped to forefront of everybody's mind, particularly those that are, I guess, using AI more day to day, is the kind of recent, are we having Fable? Are we not having Fable from Claude with Anthropic, so to speak, where they launched this new frontier model, then a certain president decided that shouldn't be allowed, so it was pulled, and now it's back again. And I guess there's that sort of question, particularly for those outside the US market, was obviously where it's still accessible, is like, well, actually, what does this mean? Has this started to, put some question in people's mind about, I guess, these new, more powerful models as they come before? And I know we've talked previously on this podcast about, which model should we go for? So I guess, let me put the question out there and we can go. It's like, so should SMEs really care about how they access these more powerful models? Are they important to them? Or has the focus shifted to more sort of AI adoption type stuff? And if so, where? I guess that's the kind of open question from here is, do SMEs really need to be worried about these more powerful models? Theo, What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think that we should start by making a definition of basically what else is there. For a lot of people, frontier AI is AI because it is hogging all the headlines, right? So Fable, Mythos, the latest from Gemini or OpenAI, they tend to be there in everyone's feed, at the top of everyone's feed. But there is other models. So there is alternatives. There are many alternatives for both individuals and companies to consider. Some of them are lost in the headlines. One of them, for example, was a model by ZAI, a Chinese company that had a bit of a moment in parallel with the whole Fable saga, where they actually released a model that is pretty damn close to the American frontier AI, enough to start the conversation of, oh my God, how far are they? They seem to be about a quarter behind, a quarter in 3 months. And then, of course, there is the European equivalents. There was also in parallel another lost story, an announcement here in Germany by the government that they're building an entire public service AI based on Mistral, obviously the European equivalent. Again, if you look at that, Mistral is about a generation behind the frontier.
Yeah,
now, I think that they're
about
working on a new
6
model,
months. Yeah, about 6 months or so. Yeah.
I think that they're comparable to the last version. So they'll be comparable to the 4.8 of Claude or whatever. So suppose to frame the question a bit better for SMEs, it would be, well, if you're not going to use, or if you didn't want to use Fable or the latest frontier models, what else is there? And therefore, if you were to compare the two, does that equation still work? Would you kind of consider kind of going there, especially as there is less of a risk that you might have access to today, but not tomorrow? Because as I heard on a podcast last week, the current administration in Washington seems to be regulating by vibes. Vibe regulation seems
vibe regulation,
vibe regulation. Yeah, that's exactly what you want regulators to do. Just kind of like just guess which one,
just
which
guess.
one should
Don't
be
like the
released.
sound of that. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, let's
So
go on.
So then putting the question onto you, if you were starting a new project now for a client and they wanted to pick a specific to start a relationship with a particular LLM provider, would you automatically go for the most powerful one, or would you put a bit more emphasis on what else is there?
No, I, I think it's I think you made the point there earlier, is that these things are evolving so quickly. I think if you're a business that's standing on the sideline at the moment, still deciding whether you should be making use of AI in your business, quite frankly, you will get benefit out of any models, even the ones that are probably 12 months old, even 18 months old, some of the older models. I mean, because when you go into, Claude and ChatGPT and stuff like that, they allow you to pick and choose. Now, they obviously want you to use the latest and greatest, but actually for most things that businesses will be looking to add value for, then actually, you could use the older models and they will be equally as effective and actually far more efficient, because that's the other thing people don't necessarily talk about in terms of the newer models. The newer models are exceptionally capable, but they are very token hungry, for want of a better phrase. And even if you're just paying, you're paying your £25 a month or your £20 a month or whatever it is, there is a cap in there in terms of the usage that you can use. So if you go into, like, let's say Claude, and you turn on Fable, which at the moment is free to use, but within the next few weeks won't be. That
Probably
will be
won't
a
be.
token. Yeah, exactly. You'll have to pay as you go with that. But even if you take some of the older models, if you run the same query or the same prompt on two models, the amount of tokens they consume will be differential. So actually, there comes a need of actually thinking, well, how complex is this task? Are the older models more capable? Because you will actually get more out of your £25 a month, whatever you're paying, by using the older models. I think the analogy I saw is it's I can't remember. Oh yeah, you don't, if you're lucky enough to own a Ferrari, you don't use the Ferrari to do the school run. You use your Honda Civic or your SUV or whatever it is. Use the most practical tool for the job that's there. Don't just use
Not
it.
a good example. I definitely want to be seeing my Ferrari on the school gates, but maybe I would not take the Ferrari to the supermarket.
No, exactly. Oh yeah, that's probably a far better example, because you can't put a bag of shopping in. But it's choosing the right tool or job. Just because the great models there don't necessarily default to that. And I think somebody else I heard say was, or I can't remember, might be on the conference chat recently, was saying actually, for most SMEs, the reality is that even on the models that are 6 months old, there's probably enough capability in those to keep them going for the next 4 or 5 years. So it's very easy for us, particularly technologists and people who are doing very specialized tasks. I know a lot of people who are doing code generation and using it in the coding workflows. I think always keen to try out the latest models to see how. And I think there's big steps forward there. But for people who are, generating marketing content or doing research and stuff like that, you do not need the latest models. You can get away with the old ones. So, I mean, again, I don't know what your experience has been with those.
Well, my experience is very similar, and I have spent the last week or so, for as long as Fable is available, doing a bit of a comparison. And whilst the difference, or the delta between Frontier and the one before that is noticeable for certain advanced tasks, I have to be honest, as I say, you really have to try to see the difference for everyday tasks. For most practical uses, even for a heavy user such as myself, the difference is marginal at this stage. I would go all the way to say that the peripheral tasks or the peripheral functionality that you add to your AI use are probably much more important than the model itself. So if I am to give Claude, or whichever model you use, a bit more context, if I were to give it better prompting, a longer prompt, a better defined prompt, a bit more information to play around with, some sources on the web or some documents, the outcome is going to be a lot better than if I was to use Fable, a more powerful model, but badly. So how you use the model by now is much more important, and you're going to get much better performance than the model itself. Let me put it this way. Garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out, for sure. But good stuff in an older model will give you good results, whereas bad stuff in a newer model is not going to fix it. It's not a silver bullet. So definitely finding that, which does beg the next question in terms of our practice and what we advise clients and what we advise people. Is that the focus? Should the focus then be, should people even stop asking which model should I use, or should I use the latest model, or should I kind of start thinking about the wider picture? By now, and you and I have kind of used this language before, intelligence is a layer in the stack. So
Yes.
if you kind of think of a certain piece of technology or functionality as a stack, then intelligence just slots in there, and you don't always need the most capable model to kind of be your intelligence layer, right? There is a whole bunch of stuff all around it.
Yeah. No, and I definitely agree. I think it's just one element of it. You say exactly, you say garbage in, garbage out, or choose your own vernacular to describe that. But it's exactly the same as it's always been. And actually, putting really good quality prompts and data sources into an older model will give you exceptional results.
Yeah.
Or
And
has the
capabilities
potential
and
to give
stuff.
you
Yeah.
exceptional results. And actually, you could, as I said before, you can actually, in terms of cost management and things like
Exactly.
that, you can get far more out of the older models. And I would be, and actually, I think to a certain extent, I think when you go into Claude, it doesn't even default to the newer models. It kind of makes you sort of, it highlights them to you, but it pushes them up to you. But I think there's a lot to be said. So I think back to the original question where we were saying about AI adoption, I think actually having a effective plan for that in terms of, okay, well, what are the problems we're trying to solve? Or where are the opportunities we can bring this technology into our business, which will make us more efficient, will empower our staff to be more effective at what they're doing, and identifying those problems, and then looking and thinking, okay, but to be able to do that, what is the information that they need? And the example I always give with these things is imagine if you were recruiting somebody new to come in your business and do that job, and you were going to sit them in a room to do it, what would you need to give them to do it? Now, it's a detailed set of instructions on what you expect them to do, all the resources and information they need to do it. Yeah, that's effectively what you're doing with these models. So it's actually worrying about those bits. What is it we need them to do? And what is the information and process that we need to give them to do that? That focus there rather than the model will give you a better outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the conversation around capabilities and also how we use them is, of course, important. And we should say here that having a capable model to the extent that that it does the job correctly is important. We have seen in the adoption field that if the AI system that you put in place doesn't give you the correct results, that's a one-way street to poor adoption. So having said that you need at least a capable enough model for the results is important. But beyond that, I won't go back to the conversation about cost. FinOps at the moment is getting very fashionable in the sense that there's a lot of companies that are trying to optimize their use in terms of SaaS licenses and in terms of the spend in subscriptions, and of course tokens is a big part of that. And you sent me a newsletter post earlier on today that that I was talking in very sharp ways about how we created this problem with AI, and how Fable potentially this ultra focus on frontier models makes it even worse, right? I mean, that was fascinating what that post was talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I probably should have it in front of me, but I think the general premise of it, I mean, it was highlighting a business that tipped over like the 150. I think it's 150 users is the point at which Anthropic take you from being a business user to an enterprise user, at which point you move from the £200 a month, whatever they are, to a pay as you go. And then this CEO had basically done the analysis and said, well, basically our annual costs for AI are going from like $400,000 to 1.4 million, just because of that flip away from those models. And I think, again, it's people understanding that at the moment they're sort of holding all that up at the enterprise tier, but you can imagine those costs. So actually being cost conscious about using these tools is quite important. I think the flip side of that is that there is and again, come back to your point about the intelligence layer. It is a real leveler for the market at the moment, because the reality is that, you and I as individuals can pay £20 a month or £25 a month to Anthropic and get access to the same model as, I don't know, a commercial bank in the City of London gets access to. mythos to one side, where obviously some of those have got access to that at the moment while they secure up their systems. But, for the general, it means that as individuals, small businesses, charities, that we're all accessing that same level of intelligence. So it's actually how you build all the stuff around it that really makes a difference to actually get the value out of that. And that's where I would argue it's easier for SMEs because they're smaller, they're more nimble, they can move this stuff around, they can manage data and stuff like that. So actually, you could argue there's more opportunity for them to get value out of it quicker for less upfront investment and stuff as well. So,
Yeah, totally. And in the same post, I mean, the one thing that I picked up was also the remedies, some of the remedies that were suggested. So there were things like, and I did not read it fully either. It was a long post, but there were some things over there to discuss that kind of focus on FinOps and to kind of have the transparency over what it is that we're spending. The idea that you can give each department a budget, and especially if you're working for a company or if your company employs a lot of developers, you would see that token spend go up and up and up. So you need to put that under control. Working in education, educating your teams about, do you always need to use that model for it?
yes.
When you are building architectures and you're kind of putting in intelligence as a layer in your stack, being careful about which model you use. Last week with Mark, we talked about small language models and how they can be very cost effective. We know that you can use open source models to kind of bring the cost right down for specific use cases. And of course, the main thing from a architecture perspective, something that is called model routing, which is really big in some of the AI native companies that we work with, where the approach is that you take a task that is incoming and needs to be handled by an LLM, and you break it down into sub problems, and then you can use the right model for the right job. And sometimes, as we have said so many times, the right model will be no model at all.
Yes.
If you're going to calculate something that requires data and deterministic calculation, why on earth would you use an LLM? Why would you do that? Why would you take that proverbial Ferrari? Both of them are parked safely in the garage. But why would I take my proverbial Ferrari to the supermarket? I can't put a second bag in there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you just basically take the van.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we can go ahead with all these analogies.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's kind of like actually you're using the right tool. And you say this, the model routing stuff, I think is going to be really interesting. I think people are going to be leaning into that more and more, particularly as they try to. And I've seen it from when I've been playing around with it. You can very easily start to rack up the cost. You could take what you think is a fairly straightforward workflow and then use some of these things like N8N to rapidly sort of build out these workflows and solutions. But from a token cost usage, what these tools will build you is probably wholly inefficient. Now, obviously, as software engineers, you would, it comes back to the days of, writing your algorithms. But you can look at it and go, well, actually, you're making 2 round trips there to the language model when you could just be making 1. Yeah, you don't even need to make 1 on that, or you could combine that stuff and make 1 trip, or you could not make 1 at all on that one. So it's actually, having that in there. And I think the other thing as well is, and I think it said in this article, was about people treating AI like any other investment. So it's actually understanding, well, what is the real cost you're getting into?
Good point.
And actually, what is the upside of that investment? Because, there's no point spending, I don't know, £1,000 per year if you're only getting £200 worth of value out of it. Or actually, you're spending £50,000 on it, but you could recruit somebody who, I don't know, maybe it's on 40, even 45,000, it's still, it's cheaper. It's actually looking and say, well, actually, is it cost effective for what it's trying to do? And you would do the same if you were, buying any other asset or anything like that as a business. You'd do a proper business model on it, a cost model, and should be doing a similar thing with AI. And it could be, it could be quite a quick thing to do if you're looking at smaller tasks, but, getting that mindset around that. So
circling back to the original question.
Yes.
I think that both of us agree over here, and I hear a lot of people agree on this one, that I wouldn't say that, enough is enough, but we're getting to the point where all that attention hogging by the big AI labs is getting counterproductive. You've made your point, you produced really good science, really good technology, but in terms of adoption, it's time to look more widely, I think. And we both agree that there is technical things, there is people management and change management things that we can do. but the focus has to shift from the model to what the model can do for you. There's
Yeah.
such rich conversations to be had over there.
Yeah, I think, just from my side, it's, as you say, for day-to-day tasks, the older models are perfectly adequate to do that. The one caveat I would put in that is, if we're looking at things like more agentic workflows, you're building out more autonomous multi-step agents, actually those new models will be more effective because actually they've been very much engineered with that in mind. But those are the exception rather than the norm in terms of the kind of tasks you're doing. So again, it's actually understanding what is it you're trying to achieve, and actually trying to choose the proper tool for the job.
You can't bring up agentic at the end of the episode.
I had to.
That's just basically just starting a new one.
I've been at the conferences. I've been brainwashed. I've had the agentic Kool-Aid. I've just got to say
it.
Yeah.
Well, then that is a hook for a next episode.
That is a hook for a
should
next
get somebody to kind of talk to us about agentic a bit more, where we, go do a deep dive on all this.
Do a deep dive on what is agentic? Because again, it's a buzzword that's bandled around. A lot of people might be, well, so what? I've heard of LLM. What's this agentic stuff, and what does it mean?
Well, you're going to have to come back.
Maybe that's an interesting one. Okay, so that's I guess I'm checking the clock. We've been running for about 20 minutes, which is it's probably a short one for us, but I think we're probably at a good point.
Your fake noise.
That is my fake noise. I think we're probably at that point there, and we've just done our kind of sum ups. Have you got any other final points to add on the?
No. I think that kind of the important question is an important question to ask that at this stage, because everybody's talking about it, but we need to see beyond the hype, as we always have been. There is so much fascination with the science and the frontier labs, and there should be. Mm-hmm. But in terms of actual real world adoption and business challenges, we got to look elsewhere.
No. Yeah, totally agree. Can't add any more to that. So let's wrap there. Actually, one thing to drop in. I mean, the same as we say to everybody at the end, if you've got any questions, comments, or anything you'd like us to discuss, then please feel free to get in touch. All the details are in the show notes, so to speak, or underneath the video, depending on how you're consuming this. One thing we are thinking about doing, and this does require user participation or listener participation or viewer participation, is maybe a more rapid fire type podcast where we go through some quick questions. Now we've trawled back through all of our previous episodes. There's a whole lot of stuff we've been promising we're going to talk about, so we've got some stuff there. But if there's anything you'd like us to touch on in that, then please fire those questions in, by the email or leave them in the comments or wherever you access this, and we'll try and incorporate those in that episode when we do it. So anyway, let's wrap it there. Thanks ever so much, as always, Theo, and thanks everybody for listening. And as always, we close up. We are beside ourselves that you've been with us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Brilliant. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Beside Ourselves. Don't forget to send us your questions via the comments or the email address in the description. For further information or to discuss an upcoming project, please visit besidepartners.com.